I'm at the Red House with my good friend Abigail Dowd, and thank you for coming over finally.
Finally, this
I
is
know.
so nice.
I'm so glad to have you here.
I love this. This is awesome.
We were just trying to figure out if we met. I think we did meet at Muddy Creek doing a songwriter thing.
It's been a good while.
Yeah.
That is where we met, and you were so quiet. But then you reached out to me like you do, like you always do afterwards.
Yeah.
And I remembered you sent me Efo Donovan's version of Lake Pontchartrain.
Oh, yeah.
And we said we were going to do that song together, and we never have.
We never have we?
We should do it.
We really should. Yeah. I'll tell you this with all the sincerity in the world that, like, you're one of these artists that I don't have to pretend to feel kinship with or to like. I actually legitimately, seriously like your art, which I fucking love about, like, it's, I love what you do.
Well, it goes both ways. I did another songwriter in the round with Jess Klein. You know, the last show we did together was with Jess.
Right.
And I purposely sit on the stage and songwriter in the rounds, if I can, in the seat where I can watch the other person's hands. And I was sitting next to you. I love watching you play the guitar.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that a lot. And right back at you. So I guess we're just, we're two peas in a pod.
We are, and we should do Lake Pontchartrain. I'm even saying that right?
I think so. Pontchartrain.
When we do it, we'll get it right.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
So we were just kind of, we were just bumping into each other with different ideas that we have in common, like usual. One of which was something about, like, maybe we can try to put the context together. It led us to this thought about, like, the way that we order things that we do, like something even as simple as, like, cleaning your house before you devote time to, like, getting messy within projects, and wondering if that's, like, the right order in which to do things.
I know. I wonder that. It's the best procrastination tool. Like, I think that if you want to get your house clean, you should set a goal of creating something, because you will procrastinate creating it and your house will become clean. That's my experience. Or you'll do every other thing. Like, if I'm going to sit down and do an album or a song or something, I will even go do other creative things.
Yep.
So as not to have to sit down and think about that thing.
Why do you think that is?
I am watching myself a lot lately, realizing, and I may change my mind, like, I don't think it's an epiphany. I think it's feedback I've gotten my whole life from my parents. And I may come to a different conclusion. Lately, I've noticed that if I don't think that I can master something or be perfect at it, I don't want to try it. And I'm like, God, that sucks. Like, no wonder my parents used to always tell me I needed to learn how to have fun. You know, like, having fun is different than sitting down. And I started writing songs because it was fun. Right. I learned how to play. I am so grateful that when I started playing the classical guitar and studying it, I did it for me. I had no goal to go play guitar. I mean, I in the back of my mind, I always wanted to do what I'm doing now. But I think I didn't believe it was possible. And so it wasn't what I was doing at the time. I was running an art school. And so on the side, I just, like, enjoyed learning the guitar. And I loved it. And it was so fun. And it becomes an addiction. Do you get that? Like, do you get addicted to a song or, like, a new riff or a new...
Definitely used to more than I do now. And I think with you, I'm, like, unpacking a lot of this stuff too. And just today, I was having a conversation with someone about, like, trying to assess how much you love making music now compared to, like, when you first started doing it or whatever. And those days, like, I mean, for years into it, when I would write a new song, I would kind of, like, play it a lot. And I kind of was addicted to that part of the process. Like, I'm going to memorize this song in, like, 3 tries. And by the 3rd time, I wanted to, like, kind of be able to, you know, like, have it mapped out in my head so that I could start performing it soon and stuff. Like, that was a really fun, enjoyable thing. And nowadays I notice, like, that being one example, just the level at which, the degree to which I, like, soak it into my mind intentionally or something. I seem to be less focused than I used to be with less immersed in these little parts of the whole musician creative process than I used to be.
Isn't that interesting? Is it because we're getting older?
Do you think?
I don't know.
I don't think so, honestly, because like I think it's something else, but I don't know. I mean, I guess we might have different answers too. But
Oh, totally. I think it's different for everybody.
yeah, for me, I don't think it's. I just put out an episode of the podcast today that's a little different. That's called Red House Roadshow, and it's actually like kind of an expression of, I think, some of my most challenging thoughts about how it feels to be a musician sometimes, and it's like some of the bitterness that comes with that, along paired with trying to find the optimistic stuff. And for me, I feel like the lack of focus a lot of the time is like I'm really fighting, trying to figure out if this is not just if I enjoy it, but if it's enjoyable, like if it's healthy, like if it's fun and stuff.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah. I was just thinking, when I first started songwriting, I didn't start writing songs until I was in my late 20s. And so I was like digging up all this stuff. You know, it was like taking an excavator, not knowing that there were all these stories in there.
Mm-hmm.
And at first they're just pine straw. And then after a while you rake all the pine straw away and you're like, oh, there's topsoil. And then after a while you're like, oh shit, there's bodies buried in this dirt. But when it's fresh, when it's new, when you're first doing it, like everything you write is like, oh shit, that's cool. Like I didn't know that was in there. And now I find myself going, I've already written about that. You know, like Thomas Wolfe says, you write the same story over and over again. And I don't want to write the same story over again. And so I think I have to either dig deeper or look broader or be more intentional. And it just takes something different than it did when I first started, because the material's different and I have other things to compare it to now. Mm-hmm. I'm not just excited with, oh my God, I wrote a song. That's just so cool. Or, oh my God, I have enough for an album.
Right.
You know, all of those things. And after a while, it's like, yeah, I'm a songwriter. I write songs. No big deal. Yeah, I got an album. I know what that is. I mean, it's always a big deal to write a song. I don't mean it that way.
Yeah.
Because it always feels good for the most part. Unless you look at it and you go, we're going to have to put that back in the ground before anybody else sees that.
So are you talking more so about the writing process than like the performance process?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds that way. And
yeah.
And I relate on that level.
Well, that's where you actually spend the most time.
Yeah.
You know, like everybody sees the performance piece. And maybe that hour feels really long to them, but it goes by so fast when you consider that it takes 6 hours for a 1 hour show out of your day. It's like a blip on the radar. Most of the time we songwriters spend is either alone or writing or practicing or driving or packing cars or changing guitar strings or this, which is even more cool.
Yeah. I never, all these things and I hope I don't sound as though I'm complaining about anything necessarily, but these feelings that are challenging about this profession is it's usually wrapped up in the actual creative process more than the performance process, and that part I've never really lost. And I've seen you perform recently, you know, and like I never have gotten the sense when we've been on stage together that either of us wasn't having fun. Well, then there was that one time at Muddy Creek where I was really going through an existential sort of drop, and maybe I didn't have all the fun in the world at that one time, that one songwriter round that we did at Muddy Creek. But aside from that one, I still get the sense when I see you perform that it's very fun and that there's a lot of passion there and a lot of craftsmanship there. But yeah, like in the creative process itself, it feels like sometimes there's a lot of mud that gets mixed in with the water, you know?
I think one of the reasons that I love having this conversation is because I think everybody's creative. And I think the value that we've put on creativity is like, it should be the most valued. Like, as a human being, we're all creatives. But because we haven't valued it, and we live in a world where we need a lot of creative problem solving. So whether you're a surgeon or you don't have to be a professional musician or a painter or anything, whatever you do, if you bring an element of your own creativity to it, the world's going to be a better place, in my opinion. So I think when those of us who have had, it's a blessing that we get to do this. It takes a lot of courage, I think, to do it in a lot of ways. Sometimes it's like, well, shit, what else would I do? It's, there's all kinds of reasons why we do what we do.
Yeah.
But when we get to talk about it and say, yeah, it's hard. And it's, even though sometimes my songs just kind of feel like they drop in, they just channel in, that's just a tiny part of the process. Because you have to be creative to make a living doing this. Everything's creative.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of fun to talk about it, not as a complaint or it's just like, no, it's challenging, and here's how we get through it and keep creating.
Absolutely.
And because that's that's like the human connection. That's why I love performing. I sit in my room and I write a song and I think, what is this going to do for somebody else? I can't wait to share it. It's like when you said you wanted to learn how to play it within like 3 goes so you could start performing it.
Yeah.
Like, there's just this urge to share, which is cool.
Yeah.
And that's what Oprah says. That's why Oprah does what Oprah does.
What'd she say?
Every time she would learn something new, it's like she couldn't wait to share it. And, you see that about Oprah. She just has a much bigger audience.
Yeah. I quoted something. I mentioned Oprah a few episodes back about her mission statement. It was along the lines of what you just said. Like, her key thing is she perceives herself as like a teacher, and she wants her personal mission statement for her as a being was like to be a teacher that leaves people feeling like they can do more or do what they mean to do with themselves or whatever, like that they can pursue their true self or some shit like that. And yeah, like that sense of wanting to share things, that seems to be consistent. That's on brand for her.
Yeah, I don't know. I love it.
Oh, Oprah. I also think Joe Rogan is the male version of Oprah.
Dude, I love Joe Rogan. I was between like listening to the Ed Norton interview on the way over or Joe Rogan. I turned on Jocko for a while. Do you ever listen to Jocko?
Fucking great.
My brother loves Jocko.
Yeah.
So yeah, as controversial as they all are.
Yeah,
I think he's definitely the male Oprah.
I
He's
want
the
t-shirts
masculine.
that say that. He is. He's the masculine to her feminine. Yeah. Which Jocko is not lacking in that department either. But
dude, no, I don't know if there's any feminine in there with Jocko.
I heard on I think it was Two Bears One Cave when Huberman was on it. He said that the joke was something. There's a joke that applied to Jocko that was like when he was born, the doctor said it's a man.
Yeah, I could totally
Which
see
I think
that.
is funny. Yeah. What other creators are you into out there?
Oh gosh, that's a good question.
It's cool to hear that you're into creator. Like not asking you like, oh, who are your musical influences, but it's cool to hear what else you're into.
Well, that's the thing. Musically, I don't listen to as much music as one would think that a musician might.
Yep.
And when I find an album, which is kind of rare, I'll wear it out over and over and over and over again. Right now I'm listening to Aoife O'Donovan's new Age of Apathy album. I swear I've heard it 100 times, at least.
I'll have to check this out.
I really dig it. And I don't know why, I just do. But outside of music, we were talking earlier before we started that I love my Kundalini yoga practice. Like that's my every day. It just grounds me. It makes me feel creative. And I was fortunate to have a teacher, Guru Jagat, and she was a honey badger. She just doesn't give a shit. It's like, come to class. I don't care if you're late. She was always late. always late, 15 minutes late. And, you just kind of wait. It's like, whatever. We'd chant while we waited for her to get there. But she has this podcast, Reality Riffing, and I really dig that podcast. And she interviews, people who sit at the Celestial Council, and you feel more like you're listening to a Star Wars episode. And she interviews people who are like completely anti-vax. And then she listens to people who are completely like, the other way, and everybody needs to take the vaccine and follow the rules. And what I love about her is people really hate her because they can't figure out where she sits, like what her position is. And I don't know, I guess I'd sort of lean towards those rebellious light warriors. Like not just rebellious for rebellious sake, but rebellious to me, it's like, no, we need everybody. It's all cool. Nobody really knows what happens when we die. So if we think we have all the answers, like, let's just call bullshit on everybody right now. Just be nice to everybody. Yeah. Learn to listen and go, never thought about it that way. Probably never will, but we probably need you.
Yeah. Rebellion is an interesting word to think about in that context. And I sometimes feel these days as though that with the world as polarized as it is and people kind of taking really hard positions, especially politically, on sort of like one side of the spectrum or another, I think I find that rather than align myself with like the extremists of either side, I think that rebellion in this day and age is kind of being like a peaceful centrist.
I think so too. I think that is the rebellion, which is kind of cool, a cool age to live in, where like you get to be rebellious and peaceful.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
with no agenda other than sort of like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I called a friend of mine at some point, maybe about a year ago, and I told her, I said, I feel like I'm being called to follow whatever lights me up. Because I feel like that's what the world needs, is for more of us to actually remember what joy feels like. Mm-hmm. And it's so hard to give yourself permission to like be joyful. And I thought, that seems kind of screwed up.
Fuck. Yeah. Yeah.
Because a lot of times I feel guilty.
Do you know when that started?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe a couple lifetimes ago, probably.
Like you think it goes back a ways?
I don't know if I came that way. I mean, I was that kid. I was a gymnast when I was a kid. And I don't know where I got the notion that I had to have straight A's and be like the perfectionist. And I don't know that came from my parents. My parents were pretty cool. I mean, they wanted me to get good grades, but I was harder on myself than anybody else was. So I had to be like the best gymnast. And gymnastics takes a lot of discipline and a lot of hard, 16 hours a week in a gym is no joke when you're 9, on top of making straight A's. So I don't know where it came from, which is funny to me because I can remember a lot of times my parents saying like, it's okay to have fun. Like even in high school, my dad used to kick me out and go like, don't come home until midnight. Like go get in some trouble. Like whose parents do that?
Yeah.
And I don't know where that came from. So I bought a motorcycle when I was about 32 or 33.
Yeah.
I had just met Jason, and who's my husband now, for anybody listening. And he bought a motorcycle, and I sat down on, like, I was at Crazy Kevin Powell's or whatever that place is called. And I sat down on this really pretty motorcycle, and I could plant my feet. And I was like, well, that seems like a big deal. I'm pretty small. I bet it's pretty rare for me to find a motorcycle that fits me perfect. I ought to buy this. I spent $5,000 on a motorcycle that day. I'd never ridden a motorcycle or been on one. I went home and Jason had been riding motorcycles his whole life, and his parents were terrified. Here he is, like he knows how to ride. He grew up riding. He's in his 40s. He's like a grown man. And my parents, and Jason was like, your parents are going to hate me. They're going to be like, who's this guy you're dating? You need to get rid of him. Instead, my parents were like, oh my God, this is great. We really love Jason. You're learning how to have fun.
That's great.
Yeah. So I think it's me. I'm learning
I hear
how to
you.
have fun.
That is really interesting. So when you say learn how to have fun, is this that the things you do are all very serious or very life and death, or like what is the way that you live? Like, how would you describe the times that aren't fun?
Oh, I think I have this notion of discipline.
Discipline.
I mean, I think I must have been like a military warrior in a past life. You know, like to me, it's if I don't do this right, something bad will happen to other people. Isn't that bizarre?
That's interesting.
And I think that's this weird weight that I've carried around. Like, I have to do that, and I'm not doing it for me, which is even weirder.
That is really interesting.
I know. And so now, through music, and I think that's one reason that I've enjoyed performing so much. It's like, I have this voice, and I've always known that I could sing. Like, it's always been something people told me. I always loved singing. It's like, that's my joy, is singing. But for a long time, I didn't really share it. I wanted to, but I didn't know how to do it. Mm-hmm. But when I get to do it, it's like, it feels good. It makes other people feel good. It just, you can feel it in the room, you know? And when somebody comes up to you after a show, I don't think it ever gets old to me for somebody to say, wow, that song really touched me.
Yeah.
Or for them to share a story. And it's like, okay, I made somebody's day better today. And I got to do it doing something that I love. That seems better than me like trudging around, not being joyful, trying to be the best at something. But it's funny how it almost takes discipline to be joyful.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? It's very strange. These are the things that we think about, and this is why we get along so well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you.
Because we both sit alone and think these things.
Yeah. And I remember, like, I've had moments of looking back on the days when I used to travel with my bandmates. And these are, like, my best friends in the world, and they became that through this process. And we're traveling around the U.S. together in all these cities, making money to travel. And I still had this strange chip on my shoulder the entire time when my bandmates were kind of able to, I think, do a better job of looking at it from outside and being like, wow, look at this ride we're on. I kind of always carried around this sort of intensity around like the job that we were setting out to do and stuff. And despite still enjoying the performance process, if something went wrong in a performance, and if like one of my bandmates screwed up or something, I could get so frustrated. I could get so pissed off about that. And I think that it's odd. It's odd that I sometimes feel a bit of regret for letting those feelings of looking at this thing through this lens of like professionalism and like fucking perfection, you know, and doing it right or meaning or whatever, like whatever lens that I was interpreting this through that took away from the joy of it all. Sometimes I kind of regret that because I like, it should be joyous, I think. Not should be in a moral sense, but like I think part of being grateful for the opportunity is kind of everything you just described, and like being able to just like at least be like, oh, cool, like I'm making these people wanted to hear music, and I'm the person that's doing that, and they're enjoying it. Like that right there is kind of something to be grateful for, you know. So I don't know. It's not like I regret everything I've ever done, but like I sometimes too wish that I could like kind of allow joy and enjoyment and stuff to be a more obvious part of this whole existence.
It's that, for me at least, it's like learning to be in the present moment. And somehow being on stage, I always feel like I'm in the present moment, which I think is why I enjoy it so much. I'm also like that when I drive. I love to drive, and I was thinking, why do I love to drive? Because like that's what I'm doing. Because I can just drive. Because you can't do anything else when you drive.
Not supposed to.
Not very well.
Yeah.
And I kind of love it. It's like, nope, can't talk, can't text, don't need to think. I know where I'm going.
I think there's something really valuable about doing one thing at a time.
Oh my God. Yes. Ed Norton was talking about that in that podcast. Like,
Really?
there's no such thing as multitasking. If you just do break it into things, prioritize, do the one thing, you do actually do it faster and better.
Yep. What did I hear? Slow is good. Good is fast. Is what I heard.
I like that.
Yeah.
I feel like I heard slow is faster the other day. There's a gal named Bobby Needham who has a song called Slow is Faster.
I think that's the idea. It's like if you take your time in something and get it right, that's faster than trying to push through it and doing it poorly and having to go back and do it again.
And do it
or
over and
something.
over again.
Yeah. So I'm curious about these other passions that you juggle with music and sort of how they, like you mentioned yoga, but and you mentioned, when you're cleaning the house, you can find yourself doing just anything to keep yourself from the discipline side of of trying to finish an idea. So, yeah, what are some of these other passions that you explore or hope to?
Well, I went through a bookbinding phase, and I still have my bindery, and I rarely go in there and make a book. But often I'll go in there just to be with my tools. I love the tools. I have all my knives and my paring knives and my hammer and my pliers and there's something, I love making things with my hands. And so bookbinding is one of those passions that would really be nice to braid back into this. And then ornamental design. There's a guy in somewhere in the UK, I think. And I think his partner's in Brisbane and Australia somewhere. It's Brisbane in Australia. My geography's But anyways, they teach ornamental design classes on Zoom, and they're actually plaster artists, but during COVID. So they break down these Moorish mosaic patterns into geometry, and then they teach you how to draw them. And I just geek out on them. I get my little protractor out, and I draw, and then I look at them and I go, what am I going to do with this? And I always think I'm going to make a T-shirt out of it. And then I get to my shows, and I'm really bad at selling merch. I'm like, I don't want to make another thing that the planet doesn't need, or that I don't really want to have to lug around in my car.
Yeah.
So I just love beauty. I could sit all day and stare at art books. I don't know. And movies. I think that movies are the art form of our time.
Oh, yeah.
I love movies.
They reached a real stride in recent years. I kind of think that stand-up comedy is the art form of our immediate time, of the last 2 or 3 years.
We sure need it.
Yeah, and they are real artists. I don't know. There's something really special happening in the world of stand-up comedy, but I really feel like since 2014, movies have hit quite a stride in terms of just how beautiful they've become.
I just love movies.
What movies come to mind for you?
Oh, gosh. Well, Shawshank Redemption always comes to mind. That is the metaphor for life to me. I think that is the path to enlightenment. You do have to crawl through a sewer of shit. We all put ourselves in our own prisons. Whether we committed the crime or not, that's our prison that we create, and we got to figure out how to get out of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it takes years of tapping on the thing. Shawshank. Gosh, what other movies come to mind? Roman Holiday is my absolute favorite movie. There's got to be. Oh, I just saw the new Pinocchio. Oh, that was brilliant.
Oh, the Del Toro?
The Del Toro one.
Yeah.
I didn't see the other one. God, of course, when you ask me, I can't think of anything.
Well, the Del Toro Pinocchio is a pretty cool one.
It is cool.
Yeah, I didn't realize.
He's really interesting. Pan's Labyrinth just disturbed me, but it was beautiful. It's okay to be disturbed.
He's very visionary, and that's I do appreciate that about all his shit, is just how visually unique they all are. And the Pinocchio thing was pretty on board with all that, but it was more in the realm of folklore. It was attached to tradition.
And the interpretation of bringing that folklore into a modern, it was really good. I don't want to say too much and give it away.
Yeah, but it was very good.
What about you?
Movies? Oh, shit. I took a break from them for a while, and I've been grabbing a few here and there lately. I saw one called, I would like to actually give you the name, so I'm just going to have to look and see what it was. Brad Pitt movie.
It wasn't Bullet Train, was it?
No, it was an older one.
I just saw Bullet Train.
Allied. Allied was on Netflix,
I don't
and
think I've seen that.
I forget the actress, her name that's in it with him. I think she's French, and so it's cool because he's really subdued in it. His character is very like subdued and small, and not too drawing attention to himself all the time, you know. So it's cool for him, and he's like a spy, and then he marries this woman, and then there's this big drama unfolding about she's being accused of being a double spy or something, and he's
Oh, I
all
have
like,
seen
"What?
this.
You did see it?
Yes.
I fucking loved that movie.
It was so good. I know I have to go see it again. It's been a while.
Yeah, I loved that movie.
That's a great movie. I liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with Brad Pitt. That movie was so good, and I didn't care that it was 3 hours. You needed every minute of it.
That's one of my favorite movies I've seen in
Love that movie.
10 years. I love
It's
it.
so good.
I
And this
love
end
it.
is just brilliant.
When I can't even, I guess people have seen that movie. Anyway, in the climactic sort of fight scene that involves like a can of beans and such, I was screaming. Like it made me so happy. I can't explain. It was the most intense cinema experience I think I've ever had seeing that movie.
That
in
movie's
theaters.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Quentin Tarantino's brilliant. And then one of the reasons I like movies is because I love the scores and I love the soundtrack. And like Ennio Morricone, who worked with Quentin Tarantino a bit, the Italian composer, he's my favorite. He did The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, like all the spaghetti westerns. He's like that iconic guy.
Gotcha.
I don't think he did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but he did Django.
Django was great too.
Django was good.
Have you ever been tempted to try and get involved in that industry?
I would love to get involved in that industry.
At what capacity do you think?
I have a friend who wrote a play, and he sent me a script, and he said I need a song, and I loved getting a script, and it just flowed. It was such a fun process for me to like write from a script and write a song, like kind of like a theme. And then there was a studio in Winston-Salem that does animation, and they gave me a script and asked me to write like a song for a specific scene. And again, I loved it. That song is on one of my albums. The animation is going to take a while. It's been some years, but it still hasn't come out. But to write for film would be amazing.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever thought about like trying to pursue that specifically? I asked. There's a program for that at UNCSA. I
What?
guess. Yeah, you could like fucking try to go into that if you wanted to.
After my yoga teacher training, I could go do that.
Yeah, just add to the portfolio.
I'm gonna have to pick your brain about that.
Cool. Yeah, I know some people who've who could point you in the right direction.
Okay, I'm gonna let you point.
Cool.
I was always the one. Well, I'm still. My friends are like, "Are you watching the Grammys?" God, I'd love a Grammy, and I'm like, I want an Oscar.
Yeah.
I mean, we all like. Not that I really need a big award, but
No, I'm with you. I
but
think about
movies are
such
for
things.
me. I'm like, I don't want to go to the Grammys. I want to go to the Oscars.
It is a cool world.
It's cool.
I gotta be honest with you. Like when I see movies, I think they are a big artistic achievement. And when I see big shows, they're obviously a big artistic achievement. But here I go again. I'm gonna sound a little bit negative, but like the scale at which some people are doing music and stuff, I feel like they're adding a lot of extra like gravitas to the way that they sort of act like what they're doing should be really, really impressive to people. And like when you look at a movie like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like that's not something that just anybody can do. Technically speaking, kind of like what you're saying, a lot of people are creative, and really, when it comes down to the instrument of the guitar and like singing songs, like more people are capable of that than they realize. And so when I see some of our like international peers out here, sort of like really glamorizing, I think, what it means to be, or what it feels like to perform music or something, and really acting like it's this, I don't know, over the top difficult thing or something. I find it a little funny, especially compared to like more difficult artistic achievements. I just find it kind of humorous.
Oh, see, that's interesting to me because I feel like the amount of work that we put into a show that nobody sees, you know, because you have to promote the show and you have to come up with the graphics and I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into even a simple show. Like you said, you have shows here. Like just to host a show, you got to think about a lot of things.
It is a lot.
And the bigger that you get and the bigger the stage you get on, it occurred to me once we got invited to play a festival and they really wanted us to have more musicians. Not necessarily because they needed more musicians to make the music good, but the stage was so big. Like for us to look legit, we needed to fill the space. Like we needed to visually fill that space. And so that was an interesting piece of it. And then we also needed a bigger sound on some levels because you have such a huge space to fill.
Yeah.
But the bigger your sound, the more people you need. And I was watching, again, movies. Have you seen it's like 11 minutes where Tom Cruise just did the jump off of the mountain for the new Mission Impossible?
No.
The amount of discipline that man has is amazing. But the collaboration, like the teamwork that it takes to do something big. Mm-hmm. And I watch some of my friends, you know, who have, you know, the publicist, the booking, the manager, the whole the team that they have to put together, and then manage those people on top of finding creative time.
Yeah.
And then even if there's 20 people behind the scenes making it look visually a certain way, it's probably like being the president. The only person that gets criticized is the artist who may or may not have been a huge part of that. I don't know. It seems like the pressure would be higher.
Yeah.
And truly, like to be a successful artist, you kind of have to also be a good business person. Mm-hmm. And that's the other part of how balancing time. Like, how much time do I spend making this graphic look really nice so that, and, you know, doing the marketing piece and the business piece and oh yeah, I got to write a song. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a totally different headspace.
Huh.
So I think of it as pressure. Like the amount of energy that you have to hold to handle the amount of pressure. And the bigger the stage, the bigger the audience, the higher the stakes, the more of an investment of time and money or whatever, like the more pressure, the more energy you have to hold, which is one of the reasons why I am impressed with, you know, some of these people like Quentin Tarantino. Or I heard an interview with Steven Spielberg last night. And it was really cool to go, wow, he's human. Mm-hmm. And he has to find the funding for his ideas.
Yeah.
And the amount of time that takes and the artistic integrity and the balance and the actor has an opinion and you have an opinion. Like, that's a lot of work. The more people you involve. It's just interesting to me.
Yeah.
These are the things I think about.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like a different world, you know, to be an independent artist that's like doing it on a small scale. Still pressure.
But we're like, also doing the job of 20 people.
All that stuff, yeah.
It's kind of like you think that everything happens on the national level and everything happens in the White House, and then you realize that it actually matters what's going on in town hall in a small town.
Right.
Somebody said to me, we were driving to Kingsport, and my mother-in-law looked at a mountain ridge, and she said, I don't know why all those houses are up on that ridge. There's an ordinance against those. And I looked at her and said, that's why you have to vote in local elections, because that ordinance may or may not still be there. Mm. You know, she's like, I've been doing this drive for how many years, and you can't build houses there. It's like, well, apparently you can now. It's like, that's local.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and my observation is not to like take away from whatever the effort that goes into managing small ventures like that, because yeah, it's like, well, and you know, it is interesting. That's interesting. What you said something that made me start thinking, and I had two thoughts. One thing that's cool about such a large project like that, like a Tarantino movie, is like everyone is specialized. So like. Somebody like Tarantino is probably heavily involved because his name is so heavily on it, but he's hiring like the people that he wants to be involved in wardrobe, and that he wants to be involved in hair and makeup and all this shit, or he has a producer doing a lot of that shit that he trusts the producer's judgment in these roles. He's probably offering an opinion on what the poster looks like, but like he's hiring the right people to work on the poster. And that's the thing that we don't always have the option to like do in the independent world, is to work with specialized people. And we don't really get the chance ourselves to be specialized until like we can like start to work away from the point where we're having to be heavily involved in so many things. And as you were talking, I don't know why this dude keeps popping in my head, but in multiple music conversations, Garth Brooks will pop in my head because he's such an anomaly to me, because he is so massively successful, and I kind of don't understand it all the time. He is very exciting to people. I get that he was kind of the first super exciting country megastar, and that he like changed the domain of mainstream country music and all that shit. But his level of success is kind of unprecedented compared to other artists. And he's not a songwriter. I think he might have written some songs, but I think for the most part,
I think you're right. For the most part, it's somebody else's song.
It's other people's songs. And when you were talking about basically the idea of people being specialized or whatever, like I was like, oh yeah, shit. He hasn't liberated himself. He's probably, as he gained success and stuff, he probably liberated himself from having to write songs or thinking about the songs at all. And I think all he really thinks about is like the branding. He thinks about like, what can I do to involve, what, like excite fans and stuff like that. Like that's really what he's specialized in, compared to like being specialized in songwriting, you know.
Which is still like creative.
It is, for sure.
And it's so fascinating because it makes people feel good.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess if either of us were like really specializing if our career was, I'm trying to make myself a famous musician rather than I'm trying to write songs, then maybe the outcome would be a little.
Oh my God, right? The why? Like, I think about like, what's the why? Like, why am I doing this?
Do you know the answer to that?
I don't know if it changes, but I mean, part of it is it's like this gift that I've been giving. It makes me, when I do it, I get the opportunity to do it, it just feels right. Mm-hmm. And I would love to give everybody the courage to use their voice. You know, I sing a lot of songs that are pretty personal and heavy and all of these things. And it's kind of to say like, I'm human. I got this and you've got this, and it's okay to feel this way, and it's okay to have this story, and it really doesn't mean anything because it's just a story, and you can rewrite your story. Everybody can rewrite their story.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know
But I do
mine.
think about my why, and it's like, you know, if you want fame, then you have to know why you want fame, because if you don't know why you want fame, fame can really fuck you up.
Yeah. I mean, I did a business accelerator not too long ago, and that was like the first thing they drill in your head is like, you have to identify your why. And
Did you guys talk about Simon Sinek?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
I think he's brilliant.
He's great. And his whole, his thing, his breakdown of that idea makes a lot of great sense, you know? Nietzsche also had strong opinions about that. It's not bullshit, you know, like some brilliant people have discovered the impact, and I see this play out in other people's lives, like when they have a clear why, like we were talking about artists who have a very clear, I am this one thing. That's a lot different than being a mixed bag of many different things and trying to make them all work. I think it works the same way with having one why. It's like, this is the thing. But I don't know, for the average person who doesn't really have clarity on how to express what that is, I don't know how to tell somebody how to find it. I don't know how to tell myself how to find out what my why is.
I think that's why I do yoga every day. I try to find it on my yoga mat.
Really?
I mean, it's like a spiritual practice for me to every day, like and I don't make it to my yoga mat every day, but I try to. And I try to like remind myself like what a gift it is just to be in this human body and get to experience life this way. Like, to me, we're all connected, but we are also separate because we're all in these separate bodies, and we get the opportunity to like grow our souls and our spirits by experiencing it through the body. And that in and of itself, I have to remind myself every day, like, wow, thank you. like for letting me experience this. Now let me go out and not take it for granted. I don't know. I probably got pretty heavy and deep.
No.
But that's I think I try to ask myself that question every day, and sometimes the answer is different, which really pisses me off. Because there are some of my friends who, they know their why, and they get places faster.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, well, shit, it clearly works.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Like, how did you get the roadmap?
I don't know how that works. And I don't know how when you truly want to know and you truly want to discover something that's that clear, what is holding one up? Like, what is holding me up personally from being able to like identify what that is in my life? And I just can't, I can't figure out what the answer to that is yet.
Yeah.
It can
So
be a
your
little
why
frustrating.
is to find the answer to your why.
I guess so.
You know, when our house flooded and I was living with neighbors, and I tell this story a lot because it was a pretty intense period. Having a struggle every day, even when I lived in Maine and it was so fucking cold, like having a struggle. I remember making all the food on the table came from the garden that we grew, and we didn't have a ton of money. I mean, it's like we could go to the grocery store, but there was something so satisfying because there was this element of struggle. And when the house flooded and I didn't know where I was going to live, it got to the point where I couldn't control anything except the day in front of me. And so I would wake up with the intention of like, just feel good today. And a lot of times that meant like doing something nice for the person whose house I stayed in. Or, I don't know, it's just, I had so many good days and I was so happy because I only focused on one day at a time. You know, and then we end up with this beautiful house because the city bought and tore down our house. And the less of a struggle there is, the more I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? Why do I have all this free time? Like, I just push a button and the heat comes on. Like, I go to the grocery store and buy chicken. I just heard the story of, like, my great-grandmother who would go outside and grab the chicken and wring the chickens. I mean, there was and there was a purpose because there were 9 mouths to feed. And I look over at my dog and I go, well, your food came by Amazon, and so I don't need to struggle for you. And you're the only one I need to worry about today. And shit, I got a lot of free time on my hands.
Yep. I know what you're talking about.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it is. When I was in the midst of the quarantine days and in between things, I found myself for some reason, and who did I hear talking about this? I heard somebody else talking about this. Oh, was it Huberman? I can't remember. I heard somebody else talking pretty eloquently about a similar thing, an experience that reminded me of this one and this weird mystery of why I did this or whatever. But when I was laid off from my previous job, which was also kind of in keeping with a little bit of what you're talking about, like, and I don't resent it, and it was like fine, but my challenges were very different and very cerebral, and I made pretty decent money for like a solo person, you know, and I didn't have a lot of artistic like drive at that point, and then got laid off, quarantine, and then I found myself like building log cabins and like risking my well-being and waking up at like 4:30. Being outdoors in like the 23-degree weather or the 101-degree weather, and no escape. You just have to do the work, and you have to become this other entity that you didn't even know you had inside you. And in that time period, I found myself writing just freely, writing a lot, and it was almost as if like the conflict in my life created the space for me to need to escape from it and need an outlet from it or something. And so I would come home, or on my days off, I would like actually really enjoy writing and recording demos and stuff. And then then time goes on, and then you escape this thing that you think is a burden. But when you escape it and you start to relax, all of that pressure to write, or not all that pressure that creates that space that allows you to write, vanishes, goes away. All of a
It's
sudden
so
you find yourself
interesting.
not creating as much.
I wrote a whole album when I was living in other people's houses. And then during the pandemic, I was like, didn't write as much as I thought I had all this time.
Yeah, I don't understand it. Oh, it was. I remember now where I heard it. It was. Have you ever heard of the Art of Manliness?
No.
It's a podcast that's out there that great. It's really good interviews. The interviewer isn't like the best in the world, but he is. He talks to really solid guests and decides on really good subjects. Unlike this podcast, he'll like he's always have kind of a purpose that they're built around, and it's a lot more clear than like a conversation like this. And he interviewed the guy who wrote that golf movie about, I can't remember fucking.
Not Caddyshack.
Not Caddyshack.
That's the only golf movie I know.
I think he's the guy that wrote the War of Art. If you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. He talked to that guy, and that guy talked about like 20 years that he wanted to be a writer and all this stuff, and instead he was a truck driver, and like what that did to his mind, how he perceived art kind of through that time, and what it meant to like succeed as a truck driver and stuff. And I think that was kind of what I was doing with the cabins, was succeeding in this different way and this different part of me. But yeah, for some reason that conflict
There's
made music
to it.
Yeah.
It's the conspiracy. They're taking away the struggle and making us all humanoids that don't create.
Maybe. You mentioned earlier about creativity and the kind of the opposite of creativity. And I don't know what you think that is, but
Destruction.
Is it? Is it destruction?
I think so. Which I guess in and of itself could be creative.
What is it about like you sound pretty sure that like creativity is a good, like you see it in people, whether they're in an artistic field or not. You know, like creativity in the embodiment of somebody's like fucking passion. And I'm wondering how you could explain that, like what creativity even is and what it, like why it's so valuable in all people.
I guess creating something is making something that wasn't there before. Rick Rubin wrote a book on creativity, and I can't wait to read it. It just came out.
I've been seeing
just got my
yeah.
copy, and I opened I've just like read the first couple pages, and it was so good. And I don't know. I mean, what is creativity? I mean, people have created. Wow, there's so many places to go. I don't know how to define creativity except creating something that wasn't there before. I mean, we could go out and build a fort in the woods, and that would be creative. Yeah. We could go in the kitchen and, you know, make a cup of coffee and put cinnamon in it in a way that nobody has before. Or, I just think that you can always, there's something about being a human that allows us to create that's just so divine that I love. And there's a positive and negative to absolutely everything, you know, and so you don't always know what's right and wrong and good or bad, or I don't know.
Well, I see the comparison to destruction for sure, but then there's like this other thing that's just not being creative. Like that's I think in a way that's like an opposite of creativity or something.
That sounds like death to me.
Like death?
It just sounds awful.
I think I'm thinking of it like, I mean, like in music.
You're meditating, maybe.
You could just, instead of ever creating anything of your own thinking, you could just do other people's music for forever, or just learn how to play the guitar the way they did. But you, for some reason, choose to do it your own way.
Oh, yeah. Because mimicking doesn't feel satisfying. I think that's one of the reasons why in classical guitar I studied for 6 years, and I really loved playing, but it was the technique. It was me learning the competency to play this piece, but it was never the end for me. You know, just playing Mozart on the guitar was not an end. That wasn't satisfying, because once I learned how to play it, it was done. Because I wasn't really creating. I was just learning the technique. That
is interesting.
It is kind of interesting. I kind of dig this question.
Yeah.
And to this day, like sometimes it's fun to sit down and see if I can still play it, and then relearn how to play a piece well, only so that I can go back to my own songwriting and see how that like breaks my own patterns. Like during COVID, I found that the songs that I was writing, they're all very similar. It's like because I wasn't leaving the house, because I wasn't getting out in the world, just like all the patterns were just stuck. Same strum pattern, and it was like, what is this? I wrote cooler melodies and different lyrics, but I'll go back to something else and mimic something to break my pattern. But that's the end of it.
Yeah.
It's not satisfying beyond that. For me, other people play, and God, they can make a piece their own, I guess.
I've never thought about the patterns within the creative process of music kind of being that linked and matching the patterns of our day-to-day lives to that extent, but it seems to make intuitive sense that they would.
Oh, I would think so. I mean, we're nothing but a pattern.
Yeah, and I think that the music we make is just our subconscious in many ways. It's just our subconscious like reflecting what we think is exciting at that time, and it seems reasonable that those patterns would match with the patterns that we are excited about in our waking life, you know?
So do you ever intentionally listen to something or expose yourself to something to see if it'll like filter through your work?
Maybe I do. Yeah. I think sometimes when it's like I feel like the seed is planted first, and then sometimes I'm like, I guess I know that there's certain areas in music that aren't my strong suits, and so then if I'm like, man, I wanna do something like that, but I need to hear a little bit of reference material to kind of get it in my bones or something. Maybe like some like R&B style drums or something like that, you know?
To get in that groove instead of your own rhythmic.
Yeah, because my own rhythmic groove is so like back and forth, and R&B has this way of flowing outside of that, or like a lot of black music in general has this way of kind of flowing outside of just the linear sort of back and forth thing. And, you know, so then like it's great to like expose myself to some of that, like just unpatterning actually, you know, and liberation from patterns for a quick minute. Not a regular practice, I don't suppose, but probably should be.
I was just thinking I should go home and listen to something else. But it's kind of like travel, you know? Travel is so fun because it breaks us out of our patterns. You know how you feel when you get back from a trip?
Yeah, well, sort of.
I mean, none of us have really taken one in so long.
Well, I was just like on the podcast I put out today, a friend of mine, just as you were getting here, this will obviously come out later, so this will be post relevant at the time, but a friend of mine was texting me about it as you were on your way over, really inquiring about my willingness to talk about the things I did. And maybe this is an interesting opportunity to talk about that, because I shared a lot of like stuff that people just don't see about my experience. So I went on this trip to Richmond, Virginia to play at the Tin Pan, like back last winter, I think, or something. Maybe it was this past spring. I'm not sure exactly when, but it was my first time, I think, ever going on a long trip as a solo artist, going on a faraway trip as a solo artist to play music in a new market, totally by myself. And I didn't know when I left the house how nervous and how like fucked up I was. And I went on this trip, and like the whole time I couldn't eat, and I was like scared and stressed, and basically my body was very stressed for like 48 hours straight, till like going to Richmond and coming back. And ended up like just like my body was like rejecting food. Like I was severely stressed and fucked up from this trip. And I've gone on another solo trip since then, and it went way better or whatever. But yeah, I think that the whole COVID experience for me in particular has made me very rigid about what you're talking about, very rigid about my routines, my structures that I've put in place to keep me feeling cozy and at home and all this shit, to the point that's to my own detriment at this point, like pretty seriously.
I bet that's pretty I mean, I would wonder, but
Maybe.
it sounds like from talking to a lot of friends of mine that's a lot of people have had that experience. And I love to travel, and I kind of got to the point where I was like, meh, I don't need to travel. And that was when I went, oh shit, something's wrong. Like, that's not me. Like, oh.
When was that?
God, the last 3 years.
Really?
It got to the point where, yeah, and then I decided I needed to make myself travel, and I really didn't want to. Because I got in my routine. I liked my routine. And I liked my discipline of every morning I was getting up and I was doing my yoga, and then I was eating my oatmeal, and then I was walking the dog, and by 10 o'clock I was ready to do work, and then I had 2 hours of work. I mean, it's just like, and that's not me. It's not me to be routine. So I was really proud that I managed to give myself a routine during COVID. And so we drove to Colorado, and we stayed in Colorado for 2 weeks, and then I drove home and dropped Jason off and went to Maine. And I realized that for me, an object in motion stays in motion, and an object at rest stays at rest. Because when I was on the road, I was like, I could live like this all the time. And then I got home and I was like, oh, I've done that. I don't need to do that again.
Interesting.
I think it balanced me out a little bit. But I've always been that person that likes to travel, but that experience is so interesting that you described. And it sounds like your body was more aware of your stress than your mind was aware.
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't know.
That's fascinating. How'd the show go?
It went well. I was definitely more nervous starting out the show than I was used to, because I've played hundreds of shows, and it was like I was nervous in a unique way. And then about the third song in, I was like, okay, I'm killing this show. Like, I'm destroying this show. And I did, and it was like a very solid show, but the negative part of it being that, you know, it was a ticketed show, and I sold like with a local opener, I think we sold like 40 or so tickets, and that was, for me, I thought that was exciting, because I can't sell 40 tickets in every city, you know, but they weren't, they didn't accredit me with most of those sales, and they didn't feel like I had pulled my weight with those sales or whatever. So anyway, that was a sad note of the show, but the show itself, the performance was fucking killer. But yeah, still just wrecked, like physically a little bit wrecked, you know, nervous system wise. Oh,
I think our nervous systems, and especially in the last 3 years, I mean, sometimes that was why I went to Maine, because I felt like my nervous system needed a break. Like, I could just feel it in my whole body.
I want to go back to Maine so bad.
I love Maine. I feel like I'm in Maine out here. I drove in and I was like, oh, this is like Maine.
What was I going to... I was going to ask you about this trip. So I think what you said is right. Or I think what you said is actually a good goal, like a balance between these two existences. I think it's good to be open to travel, and I think it's awesome that you challenged yourself when you saw that was an unusual imbalance for you. And then, I mean, but like, yeah, I think my artistic side, I didn't used to be given to routine, and I think I've come to appreciate how important routine can be. You got a dog too, you know, like dogs like routine. She likes routine. She's got a real routine of sleeping right now, but you know, like routine has a place in the world, and it's totally the opposite place of, I think, where we probably both feel most creative, you know. But I think, yeah, like trying to find a balance between those two things probably sounds like a pretty healthy place to be in.
You know what broke me of it? I don't know why at the beginning of COVID, when we were locked down, we got like Disney Plus, and there was this ballet show on, and I was like, that was my thing, watching these like young kids in these ballet schools. And so I was on YouTube watching ballet. I've never watched ballet in my life, but I was all into ballet, and it was graceful, and it was beautiful, and it was physical, and I'm watching and this Russian ballerina, there was some interview with her, and she talked about the discipline it takes to be a ballerina. Like, they're so rigid, And she said, my discipline is my freedom.
Yeah.
And I went, and so I decided that because I felt completely untethered, because COVID just destroyed, I'm my own boss. Like, this is it. This is the only person that I really have to answer to.
Mm-hmm.
Besides, if my husband is like, what are you doing today? It's me. I was like, okay, I don't have any shows. I need to like get a routine and answer for that. And that was why I did it. And then I found I had more free time than I thought I did. It's like, okay. And it doesn't come naturally and easy to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just realizing the perfectionist in me beats myself up if I fall off the routine, which I probably could be a little nicer to myself about.
That's very interesting. That quote, I heard a version of that on some podcast, that discipline is freedom.
It sounds like something Jocko would say.
Yeah, maybe. And I love that. I love that statement. I think of it as like, the way I understand it is something like when you have the discipline to be anything, you can actually be anything. When you have the discipline, like kind of like with the log cabin shit I was telling you about, like I learned that if I had to, I could wake up regularly at 4:30 and go to sleep at like 9:30. And I was like, that kind of means I could do anything that required me to do that,
Yeah.
Anything that came up in life. If I decided I wanted to be if I wanted to make a movie, but to make this movie, I would have to spend 6 months waking up at 4:30 every day.
You could do it.
I could do that, and now I know this. Same with the bearing of the bearing of the weather, the bearing of the elements in that same way. And I fucking love that. And I think that's what changed for me about this idea. I think was personalities online, kind of dropping truth bombs about like what actually is good for humans or whatever. Because like for so long it feels like our culture has been sort of like, you must liberate yourself from notions of you must be a certain way. Like that's what we've been liberating ourselves from for so long, is like, you don't have to be this to be good. You don't have to be that to be healthy. You don't have to be that to be smart, all these things. And then you have somebody like Huberman or like Peterson or like these personalities that are getting popular online, like that other guy. I can't think of his name, but these people online that show up and say, hey, it makes people function better if they wake up early in the morning. I'm like, I hear that and I'm like, fucking cool. I'm glad I know that now, because I didn't know that. I thought I thought what we were doing was like, you can wake up any time of the day and be successful, but you're telling me it makes a difference? Okay, that's something I can work with. That kind of thing.
I do feel better if I get up early. I slept till 8:30 today and had my coffee and watched an episode of Little Fires Everywhere, because I never do that. Like, Abigail, you're not going to do your routine today.
Yeah.
Because you've put your routine on a pedestal.
And you worship
it's not,
it.
Yeah, it was like, and I wasn't doing a very good job, like hitting all my marks, and I was giving myself too hard of a time about it.
Yeah.
I was like, that doesn't feel good. That's not giving you energy. You know what would give you energy? Sit down and watch TV first thing in the morning. And you know what it fucking did?
Hell yeah.
I did. And then I was like listening to the blast credits and some cool song comes on. And I'm like, nah, I like my stuff better. And I turned it off and I picked up my guitar. And I like, art creates art. Like it inspires me to hear something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was like, yeah. And I sat there and played guitar until I had to come here. Hell yeah, to break in the routine. So I have no answers.
Yeah, of course.
Anything I tell you is all lies, because tomorrow I'll do the exact opposite. Being human can be so fun.
It really can.
It's so fucking hard. But it's fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
If you can laugh at it. That's why I loved what you said about comedians. And God bless them. It's not an easy day to be a comedian.
Well, like, same as with, I feel like when a society, when a culture starts to get overfed with something or whatever, that there's these natural ways for it to balance out. And I just think, given some of the strange cultural experiences that we've had over the last few years, like laughing at society has been a great way to take it less seriously, and it's been a great way to like gravitate toward people's creativity instead of this polarizing nonsense, you know?
Yeah.
So these comedians that are doing their thing out here in the podcast space and the stand-up comedy space, they've been helping me keep my sanity, really.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I love them. We had talked a little bit about comedy, but are you in, like, is that an art form that you appreciate very much?
I appreciate, but I don't. I mean, I know Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
Dave Chappelle's on. Like, if I'm sleeping when it's on, it's the first thing I'm going to listen to the next morning when I'm having my coffee.
Yeah.
I don't know much about comedy. I wish I did, because when I do sit down and listen to it, it makes me think. It's like, you don't have to agree with everything anybody says. Mm-hmm. But it's a cool way to make you go, to laugh at the same time that you think, and I don't know. I really dig it. You're going to have to send me some comedy.
I will be glad to. Have you ever, if you were going to pick, I was going to say, if you were going to pick a different art form to attempt to perform, what might it be? And I was also going to ask, would you ever think about doing stand-up comedy?
Sometimes I feel like my shows turn into stand-up comedy routines.
I get that. I get that.
I mean, I could think of playing a show at Doodad Farms, and it rains, and then the cables mess up, and then you have to keep your audience entertained, and you're up there with your, a lot of times I'm up there with Jason, and we're married, and there's just, there could be a whole comedy thing in that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I love the stand-up comedy, but my little brother is so funny that I feel like I grew up, and he can tell a story like an Irishman. Mm. And so he probably won that award. But painting would be your thing. Yeah. I spent 10 years living in an artist studio, running an art school, and I feel like it was almost a curse because my eye was trained, but my hand wasn't trained. And so I'll be walking in the grocery store and I'll see a profile and go, wow, that is a striking profile. Like that person would be a really good model. Or, I know my anatomy because I studied anatomy with the art students. But I can't actually draw. It would be cool to be able to like go out and. So I'm like looking at the outside your window going, God, it looks like a Corot painting.
Hey, girl.
She is sweet.
She is unconscious.
Isn't it nice to have a dog?
Yeah.
And I love the routine. And somebody else, like, you got to get up and feed. They like routine.
She does, yeah. They do as a species. Yes, she likes it. Works best if shit happens regularly. Marble, you want to come here? Come here, baby. Yeah,
she looks so cozy.
She is unconscious. Okay, like she's weird acting right now. Oh, hey girl, come here.
She's gonna slither down very slowly,
like a snake dog.
Oh my gosh, she's so pretty.
She is so pretty. Yeah. Yeah. It's been a great pleasure to add her to my life for sure. My friend Molly was here.
Molly that played the show with you that time that.
That's the one.
That's cool. You have to tell her I said hey.
I will. She hello little star. Hey baby. Oh.
She's precious.
Molly got a dog the same week as me, and we didn't really know it, and we weren't posting about them at the time or whatever. And her dog happened to be, she named her dog Marner, and my dog's name is Marble. And they look like very similar but different. They have a lot of traits in common. But anyway, Molly came over this weekend to be on the podcast. She taped one yesterday. And we just got to let the dogs be puppies together. And it was so refreshing and different because they've been, Marble has been around a lot of like older dogs that don't really appreciate playing in the same way.
Yeah.
And her and this fucking dog just went bananas all over the house. Like in the podcast, they're just running around. Like she had the best time.
Puppy energy is the best.
Yes, it is.
It's always nice when they have another puppy to play with, so you don't have to be the other puppy, though.
Yeah, because she really wants me to be.
Yeah, I know. My dog is the same way.
She's looking at me so judgmentally. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been really nice. I mean, kind of what we were talking about with the house stuff. Molly and I talked a little bit about this, but there's those times that through the years I think I taught myself how to shift from living a total life of chaos, like artistic chaos, to living this life of structure and cleanliness. And then it was like it was too clean and too orderly and too like my house must stay perfect. And then, I get her, and then it's just like all that stuff is fucked with all the time. And it's kind of nice, because she...
I'm sure anybody listening to this who is a parent is laughing at us now.
I'm sure. Yeah, but it's, screw them.
It's different. I mean, I think about that sometimes. Like, gosh, if I had a child, like I can do what I want when I want, and that's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed at musicians who have kids.
Yeah.
And they find a way to balance that, like creatively and travel-wise, and like that's just a whole other level.
And a different level of pressure to succeed,
I would think so. And maybe that helps them find their why.
I would think, too, with, like, being married. I mean, I don't know. You can tell me. But I would think being married, it's knowing that you have a life with somebody else. Like, that might add some motivation to like, take it really seriously,
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know that I'm blessed that a lot of the free time that I have to write is in some ways borrowed from my husband, who is, working a job while also using his vacation time to go out on the road and play shows and all of those things. So
yeah,
it does put a different level of like, don't take this for granted, because I gotta make this music thing work for both of us on some levels in exchange for the free time that I have. Well, I don't have to worry about healthcare and all of those things. So it's just another added. But oh my God, it's so nice sometimes to like be in the middle of writing something new and run upstairs to your partner and go, "What do you think of this?" Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
I would bet.
It is really nice. Unless he says he doesn't like it.
When you said make it work, do you mean like make it work regularly, or do you mean like get it to a certain place?
To make it sustainable.
Make it sustainable, yeah.
Yeah. To make it something that we can both fall into.
Yeah.
Kind of like try to make it enough space in the music so that at some point I don't know. That's a good question. Well, shit. I don't even know what I've been doing. Yeah, it's... I've always worked. I've always been the one that, like, took care of paying the bills and all the things.
Yeah.
And so when there's not that struggle, when there's somebody else who's there to help make sure that happens with something more sustainable, like it puts me in a position that I'm really grateful for, where I get to, be creative. But it also adds this pressure of like, all right, you got all this free time, you better damn do something with it. Mm-hmm. And that comes from me, but I definitely feel it.
Yeah.
A lot. And when I don't know I'm like, I would really like to like draw some geometry today, or do some bookbinding, and it's true. That's really why I loved living in Maine. I was so happy. There was a contentment in Maine because there was also a struggle. There was like not heat in a certain house that I lived in, and so stacking the wood and going out at a certain time of the year and picking out which tree you were going to cut down, and I liked that.
Yeah.
I liked having to keep myself warm because it gave me a purpose.
You're involved in your own well-being,
survival,
and
yeah.
and all that.
So there's definitely something to the struggle to be alive that gives you purpose and meaning.
That when we get to talking about that, it makes me really want to do shit like burn wood more, and
Well, it also makes me grateful that I don't have to, which is just crazy, right?
Yeah.
That's the weird thing about being human.
Yeah. I want to grow a bigger garden, that kind of stuff. You know, I know these things are work and they take time, but
Oh, that would be so nice.
you know, when you were talking about, the reason I asked that question was something like, you know, I hear some artists talk about where they're trying to get, like a status they're trying to get to, and it's like they've got the list of shit that they want to do. They want to play Red Rocks, and they want to like fucking tour every state, and they have just like, these are the things I want to accomplish. This is the status I want to be at. And then there's other people that don't think that way and think more like, well, I'm trying to build a structure with this that maybe sustainability would be the word, you know, like I'm trying to build this into a thing that functions in the same way that a business being open functions or something, you know. So it's not the outcome is different. They're pointed at different things. And it sounds like your focus is like, you want this to be a thing that allows you to do this all the time. Is that kind of the idea?
As long as this feels like the thing that I'm called to do. And then if it's the thing I'm called to do, I feel like I have to trust it enough to just do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's that whole divine thing, you know. I mean, I feel like I became a deeply spiritual person. That kind of renewed that when I went through all of the things with the flood. And, you know, at some point you have something that like just will put you on your knees.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of nice when you get that moment in your life where you just like give up and you go, I don't fucking know. I give up. Like, there's got to be something bigger than me, and I need you to help me, please.
Can you tell me more about that, starting with the flood?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think having grown up as a very spiritual kid. I mean, when I was a kid, you know, I was this little light of mine, and my great grandmother had a huge influence on me because she was just pure faith with no judgment. Like, I can't remember her ever saying anything malicious about anybody or judging anybody. Like, I don't even think she saw bad. Like, not that I ever heard. And so there was just a purity to her faith that really resonated with me. And then it didn't take very long before, you know, all of the spiritual world just felt like it was always condemning somebody for not agreeing, and that never resonated with me. So I really am blessed that I had this experience with, I mean, sometimes I think about my great grandma and I'm like, was she even human? Like, who was she? Now, other people had different experiences with her. I'm sure. I mean, I don't know, but I would imagine they saw her more human side. But I was a kid. And when I was, you know, trying to make the music thing work, and then we got married and our house flooded. And I remember it's like the house kind of made me feel sick. And I told my husband, I'm going to move out because the house is making me sick. It was like saying I see ghosts that he couldn't see. What do you mean the house makes you feel sick? You know, and I don't want you to be sick. So if you need to leave, I guess, like, go to your mom's. Okay. And then the house flooded again. And then he's like, I think the house is going to make all of us sick. And so we move in with his parents, and then for 3 months, and then he renovates the whole house. And and a home is a really big deal. You know, it's a huge investment, and it's also where you live. And it kept flooding, and nobody could help us. And it was like, I couldn't live with my husband, but I didn't want to live with my parents or my in-laws because that just didn't feel like the healthy thing to do. And so I was living with neighbors. First, I started in a tent in the backyard. And meanwhile, my husband's living in the house trying to salvage it. And I'm saying, I can't live in that house. It makes me sick. And I was in so much physical pain. Singing hurt so bad. And that was the biggest piece. And that's probably the piece that I leave out of the story the most often. I was in so much physical pain that I would wake up in the middle of the night just on the verge of tears. Like, wow, I finally got the nerve to do music, and I'm doing music, and it's actually working, and I have all these shows, and it makes me miserable to sing because it hurts. And I was going to Duke, and Duke was like, it's all in your head. And, I was trying everything. And then it turned out to be mold. And just like the sinus drainage and just the mold in my chest, and I had no energy, and that was the mold. And like, I just had mold in my body. It was just a really, really horrible experience of being so sick that I couldn't eat. Like everything that I ate made me sick. And so I felt like my whole body had been poisoned. But I wanted to live in my house with my husband. And instead I was living with neighbors. And we didn't know what would happen. And it just got to the point where I remember being like on the floor, crying, going, okay, God, like, help me out here. I don't know what's going on. And I also talked to my dad. My dad had passed when I was 12. And just the messages that I would get, like, so I like, how do you give back to people who let you in your home? You know, when you're staying in somebody's guest room for 5 weeks and you're a guest in their house and you don't want to feel in the way. And so what I would do is every morning I would get up and I would do my yoga practice and I would pray. And I would pray. I thought, all I have to give are my prayers. And so I would pray for the people whose homes I was staying in. And what I received in return was, like, people would just say, we really love having you here. We don't want you to leave. Like, nobody's fighting in the house. Like, the kids are all getting along. Like, and I was like, wow, the only thing I'm doing is praying every day. And just, I learned to pray every day. And I learned every day to say, this is what I want my day to feel like. And I have power over that. And I'm not the victim over it. I'm not the victim of anybody, and I'm not the victim of anything. And so I started giving gratitude for the water. And I started saying, thank you. I believe that this water is cleaning out all of the things that I am ready to get rid of in my life. And so I started putting all of my resentment and all of my anger and all of the stories that I wanted to get, I just started putting them in the house. I just started like, okay, take them away. And the water just kept coming. And then the city of Greensboro bought our house and tore it down. And I remember the very last day that I walked through the house. My husband thinks I hated the house, and I didn't hate the house. I remember walking through it in tears, just thanking this house and saying, thank you for being this. I mean, the house has been there since 1953. They don't know where the water came from. Like, just saying thank you for, like, sacrificing this beautiful home, because I've put everything that I'm ready to get rid of into the structure of this house. And then when they tore it down, it was sad, but it was otherworldly. And looking back, it was like one of the most abundant times in my life. Like, our neighbors became our family. And I also felt like so blessed that they had shared their homes with me. But I felt so much closer to them because I thought, I intimately know these people now. I've lived in their home. I know their routines. I know, and I've prayed for them. And I realized that I do that when I perform. Like, every time I perform, I'm on stage just praying that every person in that room is uplifted and walks out of there feeling better and goes out and makes some little ripple in the world that just elevates us all and makes the world better. And that's my part. And that all came from that flood because I had to learn how to pray again, which was really cool. And it's such a funny thing to watch, like, our culture and go, when did we ban prayer? Like, I love football. I was watching that game when the Bills and the Bengals, when Damar Hamlin died on the field, and watching all of those guys circle around him and pray was like, wow. I can remember a time in my life when I was like, there's not supposed to be prayer in school, because that's what I was told. And now I'm like, wow, that was so beautiful. There were millions of people praying for him. And there were commentators talking about the power of prayer. And for me, that just felt so good. It's like giving people permission to pray again in a time when we keep losing so many things. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's all, I know that's all woven into my music, because for me, music started in church, singing next to my great-grandma,
I mean, I'm right there with you. Like, that was a fundamental part of my origin and my upbringing. And then, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like I've participated heavily in the sort of the culture of pushing against the norms, and in that same rebellious way that we were talking about. I mean, in some ways I stand by certain things of participated in. But yeah, learning now at this stage in my life to stop being cynical about these things and to start appreciating what they actually are and not straw man the idea of prayer or faith into this thing that you think you're smarter than, you know? I think that was what I've been guilty of for a long time, was like, I'm far too intellectually superior for such trivialities or something. And it's just like, man, shut the fuck up. Like, you're like,
No, that's really well said. It's so well said.
When you talk about learning to pray again, I guess like the time in between, you know, like when you didn't pray, like what? No, let me ask it like this. What was it like to learn how to do that again? Assuming that, I don't know, like I'm assuming when you say that maybe your beliefs changed along the way. You just kind of hinted at being apart from them as the culture has been in many ways. So what was the early steps of going back into that sort of mental state of mind? What did that feel like for you?
I think that, well, and I don't know that I ever stopped praying.
Okay.
You know, but I think the church had to pray and to use the word God seems to me that I had to agree with everything in a church, and I didn't, and I don't. And that didn't make me feel good. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like the way I felt in those spaces, and they felt judgmental, and they felt a lot of things that didn't resonate for me.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And also, I think there is that notion of, you know, coming back to it, and we don't talk about that because it's not politically correct to talk about it. Mm. Or if you talk about it and you have faith, it makes you a certain thing. There's a polarization, right, between the people who believe this and the people who I'm like, it's personal to me. It's like, I don't know if I agree with, I don't know if my beliefs are exactly in line with anybody else who walks on planet Earth.
Right.
And then I go, well, that's what my grandma said. My relationship with God is my own. Mm-hmm. And I go, oh, well, yeah, actually, I agree with that. Okay, well, it is. But then I would sit in church and they'd tell me exactly what it needed to be. And, you know, so I try not to over-intellectualize it, while at the same time, a lot of it was like grappling with, oh, shit, what does this mean that I use the word God now?
Yeah.
And that I feel like I'm a woman of really deep faith. And when I hear stories about my grandparents, or I just went to up in Kingsport to a funeral of my mother-in-law's aunt, and to hear them describe her and her faith, it was so beautiful. It made me want to be a better person. And I thought, wow, and she was such a beautiful woman. And so often that's what touches me at funerals. When I find out that someone quietly had faith, when I found out that our next door neighbor was praying for me and Jason, that felt so good. It was like there was so much love in that, not judgment. And you can feel the difference. And I liked that. And I thought, I want to be that person. I want the best for people. Because we're all connected. And we all have shit. I want to know somebody's praying for me. Because I know it works. And it feels good. And I feel blessed when I'm around those people. And I guess when we talk about our why, one of the places that I get welcomed to show up is at a venue. That's where I'm invited to come and share Abigail. And so I sing my songs, but it's also, I guess, where I get to show up. Like, God gave me this gift. You better say yes and show up and go be that person. Remember that every person in that room, gave their time to come sit here, and don't waste it.
That was extremely beautiful. That was extremely beautiful.
And it's funny because, even when I never think that the conversation's going to go here. And when it does, you're like, wow, what do people think? Because I think of all the things that I thought if somebody talked about their faith for a while. And you go, well, I guess it doesn't really matter.
Well, it don't, and Yeah, just everything you just said was like really pretty to listen to, and yeah, I mean that's a big thing about it is I think we are part of a generation that, I mean, I know I came up asking a lot of questions about all this religious stuff when I was a kid and kind of pushing against it a bit, and I looked at other people who didn't push against it and kind of was like, that's not how I want to be, and I'm glad that I pushed against it. And then I saw other people that like were in a different version of this that were like you could tell that they weren't. I guess long story short, I knew people who went down dark roads after, like, I went to a Christian school, and so Christianity was a huge part of it all. There were people who you could just tell Christianity was like they had found their identity in it, and they were never gonna like look to individuate away from it. They were just like, from now on, I'm going to work in churches and be a Sunday school teacher, and like that's who I am forever. And you could see that. Mm-hmm. There were some people who were like, yeah. They were just like at a distance, and those people went down some pretty dark roads after school. And then there are those people who I find still commonality with. Some of them, like I had two guys on the podcast yesterday, and we were talking a bit about this. I did 2 podcasts yesterday, and we were talking about this exact thing, like this ability that our generation seems to have to step away from the fundamentalists' attitude about Christianity, but to embrace this other sort of comfort with a new attitude that's like not maybe it isn't as well defined. Maybe it isn't like I know who God is. I know what God thinks. I know God doesn't like these people. He likes these people. You know, like maybe it isn't all that, but maybe it's something a little more complicated and foggy, and maybe that's all right. And that is something that I was like, I denied myself that for a while as I was kind of sorting out myself. But that's like who I'm finding the most common ground with, because there's such this beautiful peace and this beautiful like optimism and embracing of life that seems to come with just the I don't know, the mind of the person that says, you know, like, I don't know it all, but I'm open to a lot of it, kind of thing. Like there's something really beautiful about that.
It really is beautiful. And yeah, I grew up Christian in the church, and then my stepmom was Buddhist, and that was a really cool, window into something different. And the yoga that I do traces through the Sikh tradition. And it's been really interesting to learn more about that lineage and those teachings and go, Jesus said that. I've heard that before. And my stepmom says that. And then you start going, oh, well, I guess if there's one God, then it makes sense that there's all these interconnections. And after a while you go, yeah, everybody has their own journey. You can call it what you want it.
Yeah.
And maybe we just all be nice to each other. Or try to. And maybe start by trying to be nice to ourselves.
I think that's a big part of it. I mean, I think, well, this takes us back a little bit to creativity in some way or another. But as we were talking about that, I mean, there's a power that people have, and there's a way that power is expressed within their own identity. I think your identity is basically the ultimate creative project, and the things that you do with it. And in a way, I think it's about like kind of separate, like minimizing the ego and it being about something different. Different people have different ideas about this, but Buddha, Jesus, your average motivational speaker, they seem to all kind of point us towards something like, hey, it's worth the shit to try to make the world good. So do that. That's kind of the idea.
Yeah,
I think.
Love over fear.
Yeah, exactly.
And when I hear somebody scaring people on the TV, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to spend much time here. My yoga teacher had said something. She passed away, but shortly before she died, she was giving a lecture on creativity. And she said something that stuck with me, which is those who create and don't do it for a higher power, don't know that it's for a higher power, often it inverts on itself and it becomes self-destruction.
Shit.
And when they know that it's through and for a higher power, it continues to expand. And she went on to, say, look at how many artists, poets, painters have, self-destructed in a way. And, I'm not going to sit here and say that every poet that's ever self-destructed didn't believe in a higher power, because I don't know. But it was just it made me think.
It's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
I saw something, a video floating around on Instagram the other day, a musician who said people who abuse music and do it for the sake of their own ego die young. He said exactly that, which is interesting because I watched that like 4 or 5 times and just kind of sat there with it, like fascinated by this idea.
It is interesting. I really do hope that Jim Morrison just faked his death and went to Africa.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
That's my theory, because I like it. Because he said he might do it.
Did he?
Yeah, and he was going to call on the phone and say, "This is Mojo," and that's how you'd know it was him.
At one point, I believed that Tupac faked his death because I thought in a G Unit song that I could hear Tupac saying G Unit, but I don't think that's true. in Tupac's case, I think he got taken out.
Yeah, it's just wishful thinking, I guess.
A lot of good ones taken young. But, a lot of artists, well, it's still a fun thought regardless. And a lot of artists are out there for sure doing things. And their ego, their persona is their persona is being judged right now, for like all the crazy shit we've seen in the news for the past like 6 years or whatever. But, yeah, I don't know. Then there's also like, just to muddy the water. There's plenty of examples of people claiming to act in the name of a higher good, but then like that going awry and them fucking that up, and I don't know what to do with that. That's always like an extra shame, because they're like taking advantage of people's hope and optimism in these claims of God or whatever, and that sucks.
I usually try to just go do yoga and try to let somebody else deal with it, because I usually don't know. That
type of shit scares me about too much organized things. Yeah, oh well.
Well, just wait till your mailing list gets real big, and then you'll be organized. And
yeah. Well, never mind.
Oh, God. I'm so bad at the mailing list thing.
Yeah.
I'm so bad at it. If you'd like to join my mailing list, please just go to my website.
I do mine every month now, but it's not as big as it used to be.
Yeah.
Like, it shrinks regularly, which is a bummer.
Yeah. That's always fun.
Yeah. It's like, ever since I got it on MailChimp, I can see how many people unsubscribe from it every week.
Well, I know, and then there are other newsletters that, like, I love people, but I don't read the newsletters, and I'd like to unsubscribe, but I'm like, I don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
So it's okay if you're on my newsletter list and you just don't want junk in your inbox. It's okay.
I get it.
Just go ahead. I don't judge.
So
just follow me on Instagram.
I guess before we wrap up for the day, any exciting projects that are like kind of in the works that you want to mention?
I'm working on a new album.
Nice.
It's cool. Yeah, it feels good. It feels uncomfortable, which is good.
Are you recording at in Kernersville?
No.
Where are you recording at?
We did some recording at Overdub, and I don't know where. We have a little more work to do, and I don't know where we'll go.
Gotcha.
Fidelatorium has lots of rules these days, and
oh yeah.
Yeah.
I hear that. I'm doing some recording with Doug Williams. You ever recorded with him?
Yeah, I love Doug. He did my first 2 albums.
Yeah. Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I've got the setup here to record, but I just have gotten to the point where I'm like, I don't want to engineer my next thing, and I'm working on a new larger project, and so I'm like, I want to involve Doug in this.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear it, because I think the world of Doug.
Oh yeah, he's super cool.
He is cool. He's just fun to be in a room with, which makes such a big difference.
Absolutely. Takes all the pressure off me, and that's great. And he's just, he's the kind of guy I would hang with and talk to whether we were recording or not. So
that was funny. He called me this week. And
really?
We talked, yeah. That was fun.
Hell yeah. Well, cool. Well, you're working on your album. I look forward to hearing what you
Me
what
too.
you do with it.
It's always, it's always scary and fun and creating
Uncomfortable.
is uncomfortable,
Yep.
which is what I need.
As a word that keeps popping up in my life lately, discipline is one of them, and discomfort is one of them, and the great benefits that come with making yourself uncomfortable. And I think that's good. It's a good thing to be embracing.
I think some of the planets are still in retrograde.
Yeah. Which one?
I know Mercury. I think Mars went direct. I think Mercury went direct. Mars, I don't know. But there were like 4 planets or something. And anyways, it's the stars.
Are you involved in zodiac signs and such?
Oh, dude, I love that stuff.
Yeah?
And numerology. Yeah, I feel like I'm always communicating with multiple dimensions.
What's your zodiac stuff?
Oh, I am an Aquarius sun, a Leo moon, and an Aries rising. And I have very little earth in my chart, so I'm not very grounded. Are you a Scorpio? Or Taurus?
Shit, can I remember? Virgo, main one.
Sun.
Sun. Scorpio, moon.
I knew there was Scorpio in there.
And the other one, don't, Gemini.
Ooh.
Other
Gemini rising?
Gemini. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. The Virgo explains why you're like nestled at home.
I think that's right. I might have the Scorpio
so
and
fun.
Gemini.
I should do
Gemini
like
backwards, but we'll see.
I should do like a zodiac numerology podcast.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
It would be fun.
In the stars with Abigail Dowd.
Right, in the stars with the stars.
Yeah.
Have all my music friends on.
I love it. I don't know shit about numerology, but one of my good friends was like getting into the zodiac. Am I saying that right? What is it?
Astrology?
Astrology.
Yeah.
And so that's why I know what mine are. But yeah, it's fun sometimes.
It is fun. It is fun.
I don't
We
know
gotta
what
have
hers
fun.
is, but
We're going to bring more joy to ourselves. She's 3 months old.
yeah.
She's probably a Capricorn or a Sagittarius then.
Fucking Capricorns.
Wait, she couldn't be Capricorn. She'd have to be a Sag or maybe a Libra.
She's like late October probably.
Oh, then she could be a Scorpio.
That explains it. She's rowdy.
She's a Scorpio. She's sweet. Thank you, sir. This was so fun to come to the Red House.
Thank you for being here.
I love this.
I bet next time you're here, you'll be playing music and at a outdoor concert or something. So
we should do that. That
or
would
an
just be
indoor
fun.
one. So
Yeah. I'm
well,
in.
cool. That's the plan then.
Okay, cool.
Thank you again
Yeah,
for being
thank
here.
you for having me.
It was a very fun conversation.
It was. You never know where it's going to go.
I guess till next time.
Yeah, for sure.